All right, it's 2 after. Hey, Bob, Susan, how are
Hey,
you?
Right, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Tom, hi,
sorry,
Tom.
I'm in on the phone. I can't get in on the computer. I'm not sure, but
All right. So, I hope everybody is aware that we're going to have these meetings is this the first Wednesday? Gosh, I can't remember.
I think that's right. First Wednesday of the month.
First Wednesday of the month, at 2 o'clock. So we'll have one on March 6th, April 3rd, May 1st, and then June 5th. Rachel sent out that calendar, just so everybody's aware. So today, what we really kind of want to talk about, Rachel also sent out the agenda. So we're going to talk about how to get or collect public input. And then we need to talk about the topics for the report that we're going to write and how we're going to write that. And then any questions or concerns. So I wanted to just jump right in unless anybody had anything else they need to throw up there. Are we good? We'll open it up at the end anyway. Bob, you had something else?
no, I think that's good. Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Okay. So the big one is we need to figure out how to solicit and collect feedback from the public. Obviously, it's easier if we have something that they can give feedback to, rather than just collect general opinions. Well, I'll take that back. We could do it either way. We could do it where we just say, hey, what do you want this commission to talk about? And get some general information, or we can write some parts of the report and then solicit feedback on that report. Sometimes it's easier for people to like respond to something you've already written, but it doesn't matter to me, really. What do y'all think?
Well, I'll chime in. I think there's so little public knowledge about campaign finance that, it would be a very minute portion of the public that might have a perception of what we ought to talk about. I was thinking if we could pick, 3-4 areas maybe that Lindsay touched on at the last meeting that the committee's interested in or think it would be important to exploring, at least start there and then try and get that information out to the public and see what feedback we get from it. The challenge seems to me is narrowing the enormous scope of campaign finance into topics we can handle.
Right. Other folks?
I think for me, and there's probably some questions packed into what I'm about to say, but in terms of just overall topics, figuring out, I guess there's topics, whether it's limits on donations or limits on parties that can donate, not as in political parties, but classes of people, whether lobbyists or others, businesses, etc. So that topic, I'm thinking about reporting, right? Reporting schedules, itemized reporting. There's been talk about bumping up the $50 to $100 for disclosure purposes. So that piece of it. So I don't know if it's helpful to think more topically within campaign finance, and these are the areas we want to focus on. I tend to think that writing a report and then having something for someone to provide feedback on is most helpful. But then again, this is a larger question for our commission, for the committee, for this commission. Are we staking out policy positions effectively, making recommendations? If so, are we making recommendations to the General Assembly? uh, and whatever that looks like. So I know that was a lot, but maybe you can help me get a grasp on it.
Okay. So it's my understanding that we are tasked with saying, this is what campaign finance looks like in North Carolina. And we think these are some areas that we could improve on. And just kind of laying it out there. And then if the state legislature takes it up or looks at it, that's great. Maybe they won't, maybe they will, maybe just to start a conversation with the general public, have people better understand campaign finance based on what we report. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate report is out there for the public, which includes the General Assembly, and good government groups, business groups. Here are things that we think would make the system work better, or where there are particular problems. And I'll throw one out that I really would like to see us do, and that is to talk about the staffing challenges of the state board. I can't remember who I talked to. It was separate and apart from our group, but it was a reporter who had asked Lindsay Wakely and folks at the state board to comment about whether they had enough staffing to handle the various issues. And they didn't want to talk about it because they don't want to rub the General Assembly the wrong way by saying, "Hey, you're not adequately funding us." But I think from everything we've heard, if we could, at least as one issue, put together what are really the needs to have a strong, accurate campaign finance reporting structure, that would at least be an advocate, I think, for the state board, and maybe even local boards. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we think local boards ought to have more of a role, but that would be one thing. And then where that goes, we can only see.
Well, Bob, let me just comment on that. Feel like I'm just talking about my literature, my research bit. So we just finished another paper about how much election workers, like not really the state board, but the election workers are paid statewide. It's just in North Carolina. And we looked from 2006 to 2021 about how much they're paid and just over time and the political effects of it. It's pretty cool. I'll share it with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Basically, the gist is they need paid more.
Yeah, to attract more people to actually do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I can jump in on that, thanks for having Lindsay. I wasn't able to attend, but I watched the Zoom and learned how much I don't know about all of this.
Right.
And presumably a lot of citizens are in that place. And if part of our aim is to build confidence and trust in elections, I think maybe part of this isn't, there's the policy question, and that staffing question sticks out to me. The answer that she gave to that question made me realize how in the world can we have confidence in this, right? So that's one lane. I think the other lane, though, is it part of our role just to be able to inform people that they know there actually are such regulations and therefore they can have confidence, but there has to be somebody to watch this stuff, which builds confidence. In that part of this is, to me, an inform rather than necessarily a policy change or something. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm saying I think it needs to be both. And I wonder to what extent we can help with the informing the public piece of it, if that's in fact our role, Bob.
No, I think, and Mary Jo, you're chairing this, but I think that is a huge part of it, and not just at the end of it, but hopefully over the course of this election cycle and the commission's life, we're educating the public as best we can on a very complicated subject. So yes, that is I think a significant component of educating. And I'll throw one other topic out that, and this fits into the education part, David, is that I'm still confused, and I'm a lawyer who's been involved in elections for a long time, over the various outside sources of allowable campaign spending in elections. They throw out 501c4s or C4 Part B groups, and I would think from an educational standpoint, putting something out that fairly simply describes all of the various entities that can use money and resources to influence election outcomes would be helpful. And again, maybe we can go into the policy aspects, or whether some are better than others as a good government vehicle. But I do think the public is woefully unsure who these people are or how we know about them.
Yeah, Bob, during Lindsay's talk, I wanted the cartoon from when I grew up about how a bill becomes a law. I wanted that for campaign finance.
And I agree. I think from the public's perspective, they only have so much time. They're not going to dive deep. If they can, just like you're saying, David, some kind of like literally a flow chart with, it says, Joe Schmo voter can give this much, and then go all the way down the list of entities to the darkest of dark money, and say what, if what cap they have, if any, or something like that, that is truly a one-page quick learn that just shows the great disparity from the average one vote contribution to these huge entities.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I showed Lindsay's video to my class, and before class they were just had no clue, right? They're just like the public. They just are very uninformed about campaign finance. And afterward, it just sparked all sorts of conversations about, like, well, what does this mean? Where's this money coming from? And I thought that was really great how well she did it, and just the different sources and so forth. So I think, Bob, your point of like doing some kind of infographic on it would be really, really helpful. Now I can put some information together. Now, the artistic part of it, not really my thing.
So I was only partly kidding about.
No, but I actually think that's really good.
There are students at a couple of institutions in this state that we could probably get engaged who would make that really, really well. If we wanted to go that route, I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, and I'm happy to even talk to my class to see if they would be interested in putting something together. That's that would be fantastic, I think.
I mean, there's an animation program at a public university up the road that would probably do something like this really well if we asked them to do it. So just a thought.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would also add, out of our meeting at Catawba, we had this group that decided we needed an educational or public relations committee. And I haven't sat in on any of their meetings yet, but I think they've been pretty active in trying to figure out ways, if we get that kind of video or diagram, whatever, how do you distribute it? What are the best ways to publicize it? And I think that, I hate to say the sooner the better with the primary looming on us, but I think that would be hugely informative to the public and the press.
Okay. That, I think that's great. I love that idea. I mean, literally this simpler you can make it for the public, the better. Yeah. Susan, Brad, what do you think?
I think that sounds great. And I think that's the biggest question that people have about finance is who is it? Who is it that's funding campaigns? So I think that's a great subject to get opinion on. I was just trying to think what else do we want to focus on? Is there another subject as well?
Well, that's the second point on our agenda is we need to figure out which kind of big topics I mean, kind of already are talking about this, which big topics we want to include on any kind of report. And I do think the staffing one is huge, like
Yeah.
making sure that the elections offices have enough staff and enough resources to actually get the job done. You know, if people find out that the campaign or the state board of elections has, you know, what was it, a couple of lawyers doing these complaints and stuff, people were like, oh, whoa, that's not enough. You know, we need more. So I think it's really important to inform the public about who's doing what staffing levels are, and just take a look at who works for the elections boards and what resources they need to make sure we can have free and fair elections.
So I just want to chime in. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that's said about the publicity, public relations aspect, or telling the story about the work that we're doing. I guess what I'm trying to reconcile is, and this is helpful for me in determining the topics we focus on in the report, or if there's policy recommendations. I mean, there's probably a very vast difference in opinion on tackling something like campaign finance limits or who can contribute or these things. So I'm trying to reconcile, are we, given the cross-partisan nature of our commission and our charge, recommending solutions that perhaps are not partisan but are good government. I think that this staffing challenge is one where we could probably find a lot of common ground. And if we're going to go more the policy recommendation route, our topics should probably be more bipartisan, cross-partisan in nature, because we're going to have a wider range of opinions, I would imagine. So I don't know if that's a question as much as a statement, but that's just how I'm trying to conceptualize this and how we move forward.
Yeah, let me, if I can chime in, it's a valid point. We're not, we don't want to get in partisan hassles, within the commission or the committees, but, understanding, and it doesn't make any difference which side is utilizing the dark money. And frankly, both sides utilize the dark money. And then I think there are entities that, I don't, who knows what they're doing. I think it's educating the public. So here's exactly how it works. And then if the public, whether it's individual citizens, whether it's the legislature, whether it's business groups saying, that's kind of a problem, or that's not really, or we need greater transparency and timeliness on these contributions. So it may be, I don't see it as much saying we shouldn't have these kinds of contributions, or we should, but if we're going to have them, what's in the public's best interest in disclosure and transparency and timeliness. 6 months after the election, not much value to say, oh, well, $2 million was thrown into this race by the Chinese Communist Party. Those are the kind of things you want to know in advance of the election. So I hear your concerns, but at least from my perspective, It's more, let's look at it, and maybe we draw a conclusion as part of the committee or the commission, but I think it's getting it out there is the main objective. Does that allay any concerns?
No, that's helpful. I mean, that's helpful
Yeah.
for me because I know, there's been conversation about the report. There's been conversation about the education. I'm trying to figure out, what the right mix of that is, in our charge, our responsibilities, our duties, on the commission, and then, the path forward in each of those respective lanes.
And Blake, what I was thinking along those lines was whatever the laws, regulations are, that to build confidence, people would need to know there's a way to ensure compliance. And Lindsay's talk made me think, wow, there just aren't enough people to give real oversight to this, which would make me less confident. So I was thinking about it from that angle, irrespective of what the numbers are one way or the other.
So the big topics I'm really hearing about are kind of confidence building through education, and part of that is specifically on like staffing, like what kind of resources are going into elections. But also where the money, kind of this information education form of looking at where the money's coming from.
Yeah, I would add one, at least for folks to consider whether we want to look at it. And I think Blake maybe touched on, and this is kind of the nuts and bolts responsibility of candidates and candidate committees to comply. The one state board meeting I attended some months back, there must have been 24 requests for waivers of penalties for filing the reports late. And I think Lindsay pointed out, if you're a multi-million-dollar campaign, you've hired a team of experts to sort of handle the campaign finance responsibilities. But if you're a low-dollar candidate running for the legislature or county commission, maybe your cousin Ernie, who who does the books for a local company, and so I don't know. I mean, I think some sense of the responsibilities that candidates and their committees have to comply with these laws, we ought to at least kind of look at it, maybe talk to some candidates, smaller candidates, what are the problems, you've had. I know a guy who's written me a couple of times about, he's been dinged, like $500 or $600 penalty for filing his report late, but he said there were all these extenuating circumstances. I don't know. I mean, if we did those three, they would be fairly comprehensive. Mm-hmm. Both the nuts and bolts of candidates, where's the money coming from, and how's the board policing the process.
And I think an important delineation that we need to figure out now is also driving that awareness of the experience of a state compliance and a federal compliance, because a lot of the attention and awareness that people are going to have of campaign finance is going to come from that presidential level, where they see numbers thrown around, but not necessarily think through what the experience for a General Assembly candidate or some kind of local government candidate might run into themselves. So I don't know if that's an awareness campaign, or if that's just something that's woven into everything else that we do, or if it's kind of has its own time or graphic or something along those lines.
I think it can be a separate topic, and I think the candidates will appreciate us trying to get a better understanding and education of the responsibilities they have. Because, I mean, you can be civil and criminally liable, and so, we try and encourage people to run for office, but they're also putting their neck on the line to make sure that that these laws are complied with. So I think there would be value in that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of addressing candidates and committees, I think, I know the campaign finance manual exists, but maybe there's a best practices guide. I think under state law, a candidate can be their own treasurer. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Wouldn't recommend that.
Because nobody else will do it. That's why. That's how you end up doing it.
No,
Yeah.
that's, Blake, that's a great point. That's really I'm in New Bern, North Carolina, but just a smaller market without any name, I can speak generally that, yes, district court judges, smaller campaigns are often, have their own, the candidate is the treasurer, or maybe even worse, the treasurer is an attorney practicing under that judge every now and then. So it's just, it gets, the smaller the market, it really does get fuzzier in terms of, as you put it, and I totally agree, is what are best practices and how are they enforced, other than just the policing by the other party or the other candidate.
And that's an issue too that I think you can build consensus around, right? I don't know if that is going to be, a field for partisan warfare. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people will be like, yeah, it's probably not in your best interest to be your own treasurer.
I don't know. I've done it, and I've done it both ways in 7 elections. And I finally just sort of took it over after the first election or two, and just as mayor of Salisbury. And but I was comfortable because I was the one running, so I liked to see what was coming in as it did myself. So, fortunately I had the time to do it. A lot of people don't, but so I've done it both ways. I'll have to say, but it's a lot of work. But
You're now the chair of the subcommittee, Susan. So
oh man, I don't know. I didn't learn that much.
So Mary Jo, I would say the point Brad brought up about state and federal is really important. And I also think this angle of whatever kind of help we give to candidates to understand their challenges, because that presumably would foster even more and better candidates, right, being involved if we can help them. I think those are both important angles that have come up here.
So Brad, I agree, David. So Brad, I wanted to ask you about the IAPL. Do you have that kind of, I don't know, educational materials that you give to candidates? I mean, rather than reinventing the wheel, like you might already have something out there.
There was some, I used to do more of it. And then a lot of it overlapped with what the state board was doing. I would bring in the state board to actually do a lot of the training that we did around campaign finance, just to make sure that, you want to get it as direct from the source as possible. But a lot of times I was getting feedback from candidates that they were doing the same training or the same content over 6 hours as opposed to doing it in 3 hours for our program. And it just seemed like they weren't getting as full of experience. And there was a lot of tools that the state board was putting forth that I felt were instructive and a little bit more help. And I just don't want to, particularly just sensitive around as much duplicative presentations as possible around that. But we do finance and fundraising. We just don't necessarily do the law part of it the way that we used to.
Okay. I mean,
but we do have, we do presentations and things like that around fundraising in general.
I mean, there are states that actually do have like more robust like campaign schools, where they teach people how to do a campaign and how to do campaign finance. And that's something else that maybe down the line it would be important for North Carolina, is to have that kind of more robust educational aspect of how to run a campaign, how to run for office, because then you do get more people running. Especially if that training and that educational aspect of it is provided low cost or very, very low cost or free, you end up having more people run.
If you would want to, you'd have to find a home for it.
Mhm.
A lot of times what you'll see with, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years now, is you'll see campaign schools that will spring up, but they will be partisan affiliated. So trying to find a nonpartisan home for a place like that they can get the funding that's really necessary to compete with, say, a Lillian's List training or something along those lines. That's the trick.
Yeah, we had a class at Charlotte that was called campaign management. And then we tried to have like a campaign school sort of thing. And the university was like, oh, we don't want to touch that at all.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
so afraid of being partisan that they were like, oh, no, don't even want to go there. But I do think that there's ways that you can do it. But that's,
Yeah,
maybe
would-
not this committee, so.
I would say as the heat of the campaign cranks up and, fundraising ramps up, it's probably less what you learned 3 months ago in a campaign finance school to, what kind of resources do I have now that I've got to actually file a report by next week, and I've got $250,000 in contributions that have come in, and anyway, so I think I don't know that we want to try and create a course in it, but maybe we look and see does the training from the state board, parties, nonprofit groups, is that adequate? I mean, is it getting the job done, or is that only hitting a small percentage of it?
And that would go back to your resources question as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So this is all great. However, we need to figure out like when and how we are going to get feedback from the public. Like we need to have a public meeting where we get some of this feedback. So if we create some kind of information, whether it's an infographic or how a bill becomes a law kind of cartoon, something really cool, or if it's just something more simple. We need a date when we are going to publish that and have public feedback. I'm open to suggestions. So our report needs to be due in June. So I would assume we would need to get feedback maybe maybe like April, having feedback from the public so that we can then change anything that we've created by May, and then do the final report by June.
Ideally.
Yeah.
I'm
big on deadlines, Bob.
Yeah. Well, if we can agree on our sort of three major topics that we've talked about, the campaign finance, the flow chart concept, the staffing issue, and the candidate committee, if those are sort of our three broad topics, then I guess we got to figure out how do we sort of pull together at least a preliminary report or study of it that we could then release to the public for and then have something in April to see if we get any.
Yes.
And April's good. The primaries in May. So I'm sorry, in March. So all the folks whose reports are late and who are angry about outside money coming in, will probably be interested in that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get great feedback then.
Yeah.
Mary Jo, if I could ask you, I'm gonna have to leave the meeting. I'm sorry, but unexpectedly. So will you just let me know what happens from the
Will
rest
do,
of this?
yes.
I'll be very
Absolutely.
interested.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thanks,
no
Sue.
problem.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Susan.
Bye.
Okay, so the next thing is, yeah, what Bob's talking about is we have to figure out kind of how to divide it up. Like if we have these 3 topics, how do we produce something by April 3rd? Well, actually, it needs to be produced really earlier than that because we need to have it produced, discuss it, and then have it ready for publication or for public comment by April 3rd.
Let's see, what do we have? 8 on the committee, 10 on the committee. Yeah, maybe if we sort of let folks, if they've got a particular area they're interested in, and then, maybe coordinate through you and through me on behalf of the umbrella committee on, what we need to do to get more information and then put a draft together. I mean, is that a workable solution?
That works for me. Yeah, so we could, I can type up just a little bit about each of those 3 main topics that we've chatted about. And then we can send it out to the whole committee and say, basically, which of these 3 do you want to work on? And send out a timeline, like we need feedback or some kind of report by this date. We're going to get public comment by this date, etc. Does that work? Well, they did say, I think they also. Who's that talking? Is that somebody else?
I think that was someone's background, but I do think that sounds, Mary Jo, sounds like a path forward.
Okay,
Agreed.
good deal. All right. I'm just making sure I have this all in my notes rather than in my head.
Just so the 3 we've landed on are essentially sort of the campaign finance sort of breakdown of sources. And then Board of Elections staffing oversight. And then the third was sort of from the inside of a campaign, like a campaign candidates committee. Is that right?
I have like responsibilities of compliance by committee. Sorry, I'm typing while I'm listening to you all. Responsibilities of compliance by the committee, and that might be federal, state versus local money, or where does the money come from, like the flow chart, and then state board ability to do compliance reporting. Do they have enough resources? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Looks good. Okay. Okay, the other big thing is there's a poll that's going out. Well, the whole commission is creating this poll, and we can add questions to it. But the questions are due Friday. So I wanted to get your feedback and if you want to include any questions on this poll.
And this is going to North Carolinians, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, that's
So a little bit of background. I looked up polling for campaign finance, and there's not much. Campaign finance questions don't poll well, because it is just so complex. If you try and ask a campaign finance question, it doesn't come back well. Pew is the most recent one I could find. It was from 2018. And they basically are asking questions like, does big money have a role in elections? I mean, and people say no, big money should not be in elections. That there should be new laws, donors who are more likely to expect something from their representatives if they give a donation. You know, I mean, it's kind of these bigger questions more than anything that we're really focusing on. So, I don't know what do y'all think?
What about, would you want to know who contributed to the candidates before deciding or before casting your vote, something like that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, and the answer might be yes, but I'm not going to make any effort to find out. You know, so I don't know. I was trying to think of something.
Because that information's out there. They can find that.
Well, and again, this kind of goes to the outside money deal. You know, and I'm thinking in particular about, you know, I've seen it in judicial races of late, or it's like, you know, the Club for Growth put a bunch of money into the Senate primary in 2022. Now, I mean, it seems like they supposedly spent $15 million. I don't know. But, you know, my question as a voter would be, well, you know, who are they? How can they spend $15 million or, you know, what? I don't know. I mean, I guess, and we're probably more informed voters simply because we wouldn't be on this commission if we weren't. But, you know, those trying to think of a polling question that's sort of what was popping up to my mind.
So,
I mean,
just a formal poll is, I mean, going out in the field, like, you know, live, telephone, or text, and what is,
yes.
I guess, what is the overarching purpose of the poll? And maybe, I don't know if Rachel's
So
on.
Yeah, Rachel might be able to answer that better, but from what I understand, they're collecting questions from all the committees, all the subcommittees.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think the universities that are doing polls in North Carolina, Meredith, I think Elon, maybe ECU, I don't know whether Charlotte's. Anyway, there several academic entities that are doing polls and have agreed to include some poll questions submitted by the commission. And I guess it would be whoever Meredith polls to, whoever Elon polls to.
I mean, if I think the fundamental question with campaign finance, and I don't know how this would translate to a polling question, but there's a contingent that says or claims or holds that political donations are a form of political speech protected under the First Amendment, right?
Right.
And then there is the other side of the coin that says it's undue influence, takes away the rights of people. Everybody has one vote, same amount of influence, etc. So if we do include a polling question and wanted to gauge the sentiment, I think it would be our political is donating to your preferred candidate a form of protected speech, or is it unduly influencing their support on an issue or something of that nature? I don't know how to wordsmith it, but that's just the theme. Those are the themes that are coming to mind.
And I think I was thinking a little bit of a different direction, just in that the polling has been done on Citizens United again and again, that same kind of language. And I don't know if it would make sense to necessarily, especially if we're trying to, I don't know, to take this more of a public awareness route. And maybe it's more of a just trying to determine where the issues of distrust exist, assuming that there is distrust in campaign finance. I think we can make a leap and say that the public opinion probably doesn't support or isn't enthusiastic about the way that we raise money for politics or for campaigns, excuse me. So, what is it misconceptions about, candidates drawing salaries, or, there's some of those, I don't know, I don't want to get too into the weeds with it, but I would like to dive in a little bit more on where that distrust is, and maybe more of what that general level of understanding of campaign finance is for the general public.
Yeah, I don't know from a polling question standpoint, and it's interesting because two of my children, adult children, are in the survey research business, but on the business side, not the political side. So maybe I should know, but I don't. Can you give them like a multiple, I guess, the limit an individual can give to a candidate in North Carolina is $5,200 per cycle. The limit that a PAC can give is X amount. The limit that the political party can give is unlimited. The amount that a 501c, I don't know. In other words, then this is just my personal prejudice here. The disparity in what is permissible to spend in a campaign, because there is, I mean, there, for the most part, there are limits. It's kind of like, I feel like if I make a $500 contribution, that means nothing unless it's, the local school board race. If it's a gubernatorial race or senatorial race, my money is inconsequential. And I'm not sure how you frame that in a polling question. Maybe what we need to do is if we can think of any, submit them, and I guess the pollster will either, chunk them out or tweak them or do something. But that to me, that's my problem, or one of my problems with campaign finance, is the disparity in the ability of entities to spend in a race. That makes sense. I mean, you know what I mean?
I just sent a link for a Pew
Yeah.
Research article from October of last year about public opinions on campaign finance, and I think if nothing else, if you're drawing a blank right now, it might be a good place to start, just to get some ideas on where the polling's been done, where the opinion sort of stands now, where the general consensus on that might be, and where we might be able to dig a little bit deeper.
Thanks. Good.
My one
I
thought.
was just,
Sorry,
no,
Dave.
go ahead, Tom.
But this was just like more of a sort of a manipulative question, maybe, but also give us some information, but also to educate. So some question like, do you know you can look at any candidates' campaign finances at and give the website, sort of an educational question to the public. Until I really, I remember first learning you could just go pick a candidate and read their finances online so easily, and it was fascinating. I'm not saying it will be fascinating for everyone, but I don't know if people know they can do that. So something like that, some sort of educational question.
So along those lines, I was wondering, not knowing what the poll's going to be like or what the other questions might be, would there be a way of doing something like what Tom suggests that gets at the to what end of building confidence? One, it could be it's purely educational, or two, would it give you more confidence if, right? And sort of test that, which might then help us to understand what we might pursue later on in communicating to the public. I just wonder if something like that could be crafted that's to the end of building confidence and trust in the electoral process. Because I think most people don't know what Tom just said. It is fascinating, but I don't think most people know it.
I like that. I like that. Let's at least submit that as our one question, because it does do both things: educate and gauge the confidence factor.
Can you repeat it, Tom?
David, I think was.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
I don't know if
question.
I stated a question. I was sort of tacking on. Tom was thinking along the lines I was along his lines, but just wondering if it was framed as would you be more confident in free, fair elections if? But I'm really bad at writing these things, so somebody else would. That's just the idea that popped into my head. But Tom's, I think, is an instance of what I was, and he's asking, do you know? Like, so maybe it would be, would it make you more confident if you knew? Something like that.
If
Or
you,
give you more
you
trust.
could look at any candidate in North Carolina's campaign finances and give the website to the State Board of Elections. Something along those lines. But much
No, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
much better articulated by David.
The only problem is that the questions are due Friday.
Well, I think that's as good a one as we've come up with. It just needs to be massaged a little bit. And I'm guessing the pollster will probably do that. But I really like the duality of educating them by the question, but also gauging whether that knowledge would give them greater confidence.
Okay. I will, I'll do a little bit of wordsmithing on that one and then submit it and see what they say. I might ask, Martha Croft is really, really good at this. So I'll actually give it to her before I submit it. She's fantastic. Like, she used to work for a polling organization. So, she can help us make it very neutral. So yeah, that'd be great. Perfect. Okay. So I'll do that. And then I'm going to type up like a little bit about each of these questions and submit it to the whole committee, and everybody's going to tell me which part they want to work on. We're going to get that done by before April 3rd. Probably find out the deadline in there. And then we're going to have this public meeting or public somehow interaction on April 3rd to get feedback from them on the three main topics. And then we can fix anything by May 1st and then do the final report by June 5th. Sound like a plan?
Yes. And then hopefully we gather again at Catawba College in July.
In July. Okay.
But
And
David,
I think this next committee meets the day after the primary, so that'll be interesting.
yeah, that will be.
That'd be a good day, right? So yeah.
Mary Jo, can I ask just a schedule question for you to think
Absolutely.
about? Yeah, so would it make it seems like there's a date there where we have to have something delivered in what you said at the beginning of a month. And will we have time? Does it make sense to move one of these off of the first week and maybe later, just so we have some more time on it? I'm just throwing that out there for you to consider when you look at the workflow on this.
So I need to sit in front of a calendar to think about that, but which one are you thinking might need more time, like after the public meeting or before?
I feel like you mentioned something about the writing of the report, and I was thinking, wow, it gives us like 3 weeks and then a whole month before the thing is due. I think that's getting up to June. I wonder if you push a couple of weeks just to buy us some more time for people to work on things. Up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, cool. All righty. Well, I will get that out to you. It's going to take a couple of days. But probably Monday or Tuesday, hopefully get that out to y'all.
Okay.
And then we'll keep going.
Mary Jo, thank you for your continued leadership.
Well, thanks,
And keep
Bob.
back.
Any other questions, concerns, anything?
No,
Okay, good.
thank you all, Mary Jo, Bob, David.
Yeah.
Bob.
All right, sounds good.
Everyone.
Look for the email.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
see you.
guys.